Sponsored by Squarespace. Yes. If it's a kung fu movie, there's a good chance it's about punching foreign invaders. Folk heroes saved China from colonialism by defeating foreign martial artists is a big cliche, but a beloved one. And that got me thinking, has that ever happened? Was kung fu ever used against foreign fighters around the early 1900s? Well, the answer is yes, it's called a Boxer Rebellion. You see, at the turn of the 20th century, the scramble for China was in full swing. Various colonial powers were exploiting China. After losing multiple wars, Hong Kong became a British colony, many port cities became concessions, missionaries began Christianizing the country. Amidst discontent, a group called Yihequan arose and rebelled, hoping to expel foreigners from China through violent means. The Western press called them boxers, as Yihequan members were martial artists. These boxers claimed that they could bring down the gods to dwell in their persons, and imbued thereby claimed that they could use their weapons with great rapidity on their enemies, make themselves invulnerable against bullets and shells, and power to stop the rifles and big guns of the enemy from firing upon them. Didn't work out too hot, did it? But that's not what you want to know, right? You want to know if there was ever a proper arena match with a Chinese martial artist on one side and a foreign fighter on the other side, just like in the movies. Well, I did some digging, and the answer is this entire dang video. Today, let's take a look at the history of Chinese kung fu folk heroes and see the true stories behind these iconic fight scenes. Let's get rumble. The 2006 film Fearless, starring Jet Li, is a dramatization of the life of Huo Yuanjia, a Chinese martial artist and folk hero. In real life, he was a co-founder of the Qinwu Athletic Association, the first public martial arts school in China, which helped turn kung fu into an accessible sport. In folk history, however, Huo is held as a hero for defeating foreign fighters in public matches, a feat that inspired the nation in a time of national crises. Among his matches, the most publicized one is a fight against a boxer named Hercules O'Brien, which is depicted in this scene. The real story, however, is less dramatic. Very little is known about O'Brien. Some sources claim that he was a British or Irish boxer. Others claim that he was an American wrestler. Whatever his background was, he was mostly an entertainer in Shanghai, essentially a circus strongman not far from a pro wrestler. Just like a pro wrestler, O'Brien showboasted about his strength and publicly challenged Chinese fighters to come forward. Considering the time period, showboasting with a sprinkle of racism was pretty much expected. In response, Huo Yuanjia came forward, and a match between them was arranged. However, the bout didn't end up happening. Chinese scholar Chen Gongzhe recorded it as such. It was mid-June, and the match began at 4 p.m. O'Brien failed to appear, reportedly had left town. The organizer put his disappointment aside and suggested the audience to come forward for a match. Journalist Wang Kangnian corroborated. Recently, strongman Huo of Shanghai challenged an American strongman to a bout. The match ended prematurely with the American strongman's absence. From these sources, we can see two things. An event was held, and only Huo Yuanjia attended. The reason for cancellation, however, was reported differently in our sources. Journalist Wang Kangnian reported that the American strongman wanted to use boxing rules, no kicking, no pressure point techniques. Huo Yuanjia did not wish to fight with a handicap, and the bout was cancelled. Scholar Chen Gongzhe, however, said that a bout was arranged using the rules of wrestling. The match was set after multiple negotiations. Regardless, no fights between the two occurred, The match that propelled Huo into a national hero was a win by default. That's not to say Huo never fought any foreign fighters. The same scholar, Chen Gongzhe, also recorded a private sparring session between Huo and a group who appear to be judo practitioners. Japanese fighters from a dojo in Sanyuanli, Shanghai, wished to discuss martial arts with Huo. After some tea, the fighters expressed their admiration, and they begin discussing the commonalities between Chinese and Japanese martial arts. After this wholesomeness, they engaged in a friendly bout, a no-striking wrestling match. The Japanese fighter attacked, and Yuan Jia countered. When the Japanese failed to gain the initiative, Yuan Jia took the advantage and threw him over. The Japanese accidentally fell onto a stair step, unfortunately breaking his right hand. The matter-of-fact wording doesn't seem to be boasting Huo's strength. Instead, it appears to be excusing him, explaining that it was an accident, not a violent outburst. Either way, there you have it. Huo Yuanjia had fought a foreign fighter, but only on friendly terms. It was not a matter of national pride. When you think about it, it makes sense. Reality is boring and mundane. High-profile, international, and interdisciplinary fights are difficult to arrange even today. If a fight like that would happen back then, it was likely to be an informal encounter. With time, people embellished these stories, and they eventually became the climactic battles of the films we love. Back in those days, foreign fighters like Hercules would send out arena invitations by posting an ad in newspapers. If it would happen today, they'd probably post on Twitter, because of the racism. But you, my dear viewers, are good people, and all you wanted are friendly spars like the judo fighters. And that is why you need a website from Squarespace. By giving your event a dedicated website, you are not only showing your commitment to the cause, you are also distancing yourself from the toxicity and rampant AI in social media. A professional website feels formal and official, and its customizability allows you to show off your truthful and sincere self. Best yet, the editing process is very simple. You just pick a template and start editing. No coding is required, and no professional training is needed. Start your free trial at squarespace.com/accencinema. Use the code AccentCinema and you can get 10% off your first purchase. Whether you are sending invites for a spar, a dance-off, a rap battle, or a Smash Bros tournament, having a website is essential. Check out squarespace.com/AccentCinema and start your free trial today. Unfortunately, most Kung Fu stories were not as well recorded as that of Huo Yuanjia's. Let's speedrun through a few of them. This badass-looking old man is Wang Ziping. No movies were made about him, but I'm bringing him in anyway because dude's hilarious. Many foreign bout victories were attributed to him, but most of his opponents are unnamed, and thus the stories were lost to history. The one opponent who was named was Russian strongman Kang Tire. However, this story also appears to be fictitious. The truth, though, is a lot funnier. As reported by Da Gongbao, Social Welfare, and other newspapers at the time, Kang Tire set up an arena in Beijing, but that was quickly shut down by the cops for safety reasons. Soon after, Chinese martial artists exposed him for being a faker, using hollow metal balls and prop metal chains in his strongman act. Humiliated, Kang Tire left without a fight. He later issued a public apology. Wang Ziping didn't even show up in the story. But the hilarity continues. Though Wang Ziping was an influential martial artist, he was also a power lifter. Yes, you heard that right. As recounted by his granddaughter, a group of Germans once challenged him to a weightlifting competition outside a mosque. Wang Ziping was Muslim. Wang lifted about 500 pounds with ease, shutting the Germans up. Wang Ziping bowed to the crowd, flipping away and intentionally landed on his back right in front of the weights. Then he extended his arm over his head. Two large hands grabbed the bamboo bar and quickly pulled up the stones. People cheered. It is a story so strange that it is oddly believable, especially when you check out his photos. This is purportedly him during his younger years, and if that is true, yeah, I can see him doing exactly what was described. God damn. Moving on, Southern Kung Fu folk hero Wong Fei-hung is the main character in numerous films, including the Once Upon a Time in China series and the Drunken Master series. Unlike other examples in this video, as far as I know, Wong Fei-hung wasn't known for fighting foreigners. Old movies about him never pitch him against foreign martial artists. Fighting a gorilla? Yes. Fighting an American? Nope. The impression that he fought against Western invaders was thanks to the success of the 90s revival series, Once Upon a Time in China. Needless to say, these films are not historical in nature. There is, however, a widely circulated story about him fighting a dog owned by a foreigner. As the story goes, some foreign douchebag set up an arena with his dog inside, taunting Chinese fighters to come forward for a bout. Wong was requested by other martial artists, and he was able to defeat it. Not exactly an epic story. However, even this story appears to be a folktale passed down by oral traditions. I could not find any primary sources. Either way, the consensus is that Wong had never fought a foreign fighter. In real life, Wong Fei-hung is famous for the legacy he left with his disciples. Notably, many of his students went on to become filmmakers in Hong Kong. For example, action actor Lau Zham was a third-generation disciple. His son, Lau Ka-leung, went on to become a very influential action director, working on films such as Drunken Master 2. Much like Wong Fei-hung, Ip Man was never known for fighting foreigners until the Ip Man movie series. In fact, Ip Man wasn't even known to be a fighter at all. His greatest legacy, besides mentoring Bruce Lee, was the continuation and popularization of Wing Chun. Duncan Leung, Ip Man's closest disciple, remembers his master not for his strength, but for his knowledge of Kung Fu and his introverted, polite personality. Bear in mind, it was the 1950s. Hong Kong was in a wuxia craze. As recounted by Duncan, newspapers back then often report stories of Kung Fu schools getting into fights. Duncan himself, being a teenage rascal, got into many of such bouts. But Ip Man was always peaceful. As for how strong Ip Man was, Duncan Leung wrote, "After over a year of private lessons, Master showed me Wing Chun pole form for the first time. He began by placing a nail against a wall, and then speared his wooden pole forward, driving the nail in with one strike. When I saw that for the first time, I was stunned by his strength and accuracy." And that was about as violent as Ip Man has ever gotten. In case you don't know, Chen Zhen from Fist of Fury is a fictional character. It was created by Hong Kong novelist Ni Kuang specifically for Bruce Lee and this movie. In the film, Chen Zhen seeks vengeance after he realizes his master, Huo Yuanjia, was secretly poisoned by the Japanese. Oh yes, we are circling back to him again. In real life, Huo Yuanjia died at only 52. His fame and sudden passing caused many rumors. Surprisingly though, the poison story is not complete BS. Chen Gongzhe recorded his passing. Mr. Huo had hemoptysis, which flared up often. A Japanese pharmacist came to his home and sold him some medicine to cure his sickness. Mr. Huo took the pills and his sickness got worse. The polite way to describe this is that Huo died of his chronic illness. The less charitable way to say this is that Huo died after being scammed by someone who was most likely a snake oil salesman. Ah, Victorian medicine. The rumor quickly got dramatized by writers and eventually morphed into Fist of Fury. Chen Zhen never fought any foreigners because he doesn't exist. Finally, we have Sun Lutang, famous for developing the Sun-style Tai Chi. Online, it's easy to find very detailed stories about his multiple bouts with foreign martial artists, including one with a Japanese fighter named Itagaki Katsuo. Supposedly, Itagaki was a 3-time martial arts champion in Japan and had come to meet Sun after hearing about his kung fu prowess. If you are already calling BS, yup, no such person was ever found in history. This story is usually attributed to a 2008 book, loosely translated to Research on the Martial Arts of the Sun Family. There is, as far as I know, no corroborating evidence. The circulated story is always written like a wuxia novel, indicating its fictitious nature. Sun Lutang's left hand pierced forward, poking Itagaki in his stomach with 2 fingers. As if stung by a hornet, Itagaki's body trembled. In a flash, Sun Lutang punched with his right arm, and Itagaki fell back multiple feet. Yeah, I'm gonna press X to doubt that. That's not to say Sun Lutang wasn't a fighter, and this applied to everyone we mentioned too. They might not have fought a foreigner, but there are a fair few recorded instances of them fighting other Chinese fighters. If there is any trickery going on, it was likely made for the prestige of winning an international bout. Oftentimes, these stories weren't even fabricated by the martial artists themselves. Instead, they were products of a society that desperately needed heroes. This brings us to our next point. So, why are these sources so few and far between and so unreliable? As with most things, there are many complex causes, but the one reason I find most interesting is Kung Fu's flip-flopping reputation. Remember the detail about China being exploited by colonialism. It was the definition of a desperate time. The May 17, 1917 issue of China Times has an ad for martial arts lessons that says, "To strengthen China, one must strengthen the people." And right below that ad are multiple rows of news about ongoing wars. That was how depressing things were in China. There was a genuine fear that China might cease to exist. Huo Yuanjia's victory against a foreign fighter, even if no fight did occur, was nevertheless a ray of light for the nation, something desperately needed at the time. As such, victory against foreign martial artists became a highly sought-after badge of honor. In other words, it became a needed propaganda tool during times of war. With time, the wars ended, but this culture remains, as do the folk legends. Paradoxically, Kung Fu was also seen as vulgar. Back in the days of the Boxer Rebellion, Kung Fu's tie to esoteric religion already gave it a bad reputation. The whole thing about bring down the gods to dwell in their persons was unpopular with regular Chinese people and appeared downright satanic to Christian missionaries. Meanwhile, due to continuous social unrest, many martial artists fled to Hong Kong. Being a British colony, it was largely free from the fire and ashes of war and the chaos within the new communist China. Unfortunately, being refugees, many martial artists found themselves having nowhere to go, so they turned to organized crime. The secrecies of Kung Fu schools, combined with criminal ties and pagan rituals, soured Kung Fu's credibility. Though the perceptions were polar opposite, the outcome was the same. There was little incentive to record this part of history accurately. Those who saw Kung Fu as a matter of national pride sought to exaggerate its accomplishment. Those who belittled it did not find it proper to glorify public brawls. Where there is a gap, there be dragons. People began filling in the gaps of history with folktales and legends. Wikipedia regurgitates the information, often without citing any sources. And the truth was buried. Before we go, I want to make sure not to diminish the contribution these folk heroes made. These days, with so many posters going around and so much interest tied to the discipline, it's tempting to just see Kung Fu as an art of fraud. But you have to remember, boxing didn't used to look as sleek as its modern incarnation. In the past 100 years, martial arts around the world changed a lot thanks to the growing popularity of combat sports. These formalized games gave martial artists both incentive to become more efficient and opportunities to perfect the crafts. In this regard, China, due to national turmoil, fell behind. It was partially thanks to the efforts of these martial artists Kung Fu was preserved at all. Little do these heroes know, their love for Kung Fu and our love for them would eventually make Kung Fu a global sensation. Instead of fighting foreigners, it won the hearts of the world. In a way, that's the greatest international battle Kung Fu has ever fought.